Western Rite Orthodoxy. Western Rite Orthodoxy, also called Western Orthodoxy or the Orthodox Western Rite, are congregations within the autocephalous churches of Eastern and Oriental Orthodoxy which perform their liturgy in Western forms. These congregations have used Western liturgical forms such as the Sarum Rite, the Mozarabic Rite, and Gallican Rite. Some congregations use what has become known simply as the English Liturgy, which is derived from the Anglican Book of Common Prayer, albeit with some modification to the text to emphasize Orthodox theological teaching. The Western Rite that exists today has been heavily influenced by the life and work of Julian Joseph Overbeck. Western Rite missions, parishes, and monasteries exist within certain jurisdictions of the mainstream Eastern Orthodox Church, predominantly within the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia, and Antiochian Orthodox Christian Archdiocese of North America. In addition, the Western Rite is practiced within religious communities outside the mainstream Eastern Orthodox Church. The communion of the Western Orthodox Churches and the Orthodox Church of France are entirely Western Rite. Furthermore, there is a small number of Western Rite communities among the Old Calendarists, such as the former Western Rite Exarchate of the Holy Synod of Milan and the autonomous Orthodox Metropolia of North and South America and the British Isles. Within independent Orthodoxy, the American Orthodox Catholic Church's successors have Western Rite Metropolia. In the past, there have also been Western Rite communities within Oriental Orthodoxy. There also are a number of independent Western Orthodox churches and monasteries that are neither part of the Oriental Orthodox Church nor the Eastern Orthodox Church. Western Rite parishes are found almost exclusively in countries with large Roman Catholic or Protestant populations. There are also numerous devotional societies and publishing ventures related to the Western Rite. Western Rite orthodoxy remains a contentious issue for some, however. The movement continues to grow in numbers and in acceptance. Origins. In the times prior to theological disputes that arose between the 9th and 11th century, Byzantine Rite churches of the East and Latin Rite churches of the West were in full communion, confessing the same Orthodox, Catholic Christian faith. In the East, the Byzantine Rite was the predominant liturgical rite. In the West, the Latin Rite was the dominant rite. In the time of the final East-West Schism of 1054, most of the churches that remained in communion with 4 Eastern patriarchates used the Byzantine Rite, though there were still regions where other liturgies, including the Roman Rite, were used. One of such regions was Byzantine southern Italy. In the time of the final split 1054, much of the southern Italy was still under Byzantine rule and was organized as the Catapanate of Italy. For centuries, church life in Byzantine regions of Italy was developing under dual influence of Latin and Byzantine traditions. During the 11th century, Latin Rite churches in Byzantine Italy still did not use the interpolated Nicene Creed Filioque and were in full communion with Eastern Orthodoxy. During the Byzantine-Norman Wars, Byzantine Empire finally lost its last positions in the West. The Norman conquest of southern Italy was completed with the conquest of Bari in 1071. One of the main consequences of the political change was the establishment of the supremacy of the Church of Rome over the church life in former Byzantine Italy. The main theological challenge was resolved at the Council of Bari in 1098. From that point, all churches in southern Italy were obligated to accept the Filioque clause into the creed. Implementation of that decision soon marked the end of Latin Rite orthodoxy in southern Italy. After the 11th century, the Byzantine Rite was gradually becoming dominant in the Eastern Orthodox world, almost to the point of exclusion of any other liturgy. Traditions of Old Western Orthodoxy were still regarded with high reverence by Eastern Orthodox theologians, but for centuries no organized attempt was made to preserve or revive the Latin branch of Orthodoxy. This changed in the late 19th and early 20th centuries when some Western Christians converted to Orthodoxy, but retained some of their Western liturgical forms of worship. 19th century. During the 1840s, William Palmer, a Church of England priest, corresponded with Russian Orthodox Church and Metropolitan Filaret Drozdov of Moscow, and Alexei Kamyakov. From 1864, Julian Joseph Overbeck, a former Roman Catholic priest, worked to establish a modern Orthodox Western Rite. Overbeck converted from Catholicism to Lutheranism and married. He then emigrated to England in 1863 to become professor of German at the Royal Military Academy, Woolwich, where he also undertook studies of the Church of England and Orthodoxy. In 1865, Overbeck was received as a layman into the Russian Orthodox Church because he had married following his ordination as a Roman Catholic priest by Father Eugene Popov at the Russian Embassy in London. As a part of his conversion into the ROC, Overbeck requested permission from the Holy Synod of the Russian Orthodox Church to begin a Western Orthodox Church in England. Initially, Filaret was hesitant about Overbeck's request, but did not rule out the idea entirely. Overbeck outlined his rationale for a Western Orthodox Church in his 1866 book Catholic Orthodoxy and Anglo-Catholicism, a largely polemical work describing why the established Western churches should be rejected. In 1867, Overbeck began to edit the Orthodox Catholic Review, a periodical for the advancement of Western Orthodoxy. Overbeck convinced others about the feasibility of a Western Orthodox Church, and in 1869 submitted a petition containing 122 signatures, including many in the Oxford movement, to the Holy Synod asking for the creation of a Western liturgical rite within the ROC. A synodical commission investigated Overbeck's petition. In 1870, he stated his case before the commission in St. Petersburg. The commission approved the petition, and he was instructed to present a revised Western liturgy for evaluation by the commission. He presented a revised Western liturgy in December. That liturgy was subsequently approved for use specifically in the British Isles. Over the next several years, Overbeck developed liturgies for administering other sacraments and for praying a divine office. Overbeck attempted to reach Old Catholics to his scheme since they had recently schismed from the Roman Catholic Church over First Vatican Council's dogmatic definition of papal infallibility, though to little avail. During this time, he continued to criticize Roman Catholics and Anglicans as well as those Western converts to Orthodoxy who utilized the Byzantine Rite. By 1876, Overbeck appealed to other Orthodox churches for their recognition of his plan. In 1879, he was received in audience by the Patriarch Joachim Roman III of Constantinople, who recognized the theoretical right of Western Christians to have a Western Orthodox Church. 3 years later, Joachim Roman III and the Synod of the Ecumenical Patriarchate conditionally approved Overbeck's Western Rite and Benedictine offices. However, Overbeck's efforts ultimately did not result in the establishment of a Western Orthodoxy. He was especially suspicious of the role which the Greeks in London and the Church of Greece generally played in the stagnation of his ambitions, directly blaming the Greek churches' protest against the plan in 1892. The Orthodox Catholic Review ended publication in 1885, and Overbeck died in 1905 without seeing a Western Orthodox Church. Georges Florovsky summed up Overbeck's experience in this way: "It was not just a fantastic dream." The question raised by Overbeck was pertinent, even if his own answer to it was confusedly conceived, and probably the vision of Overbeck was greater than his personal interpretation. 20th century. While Overbeck did not live to see his dream successful, the idea of a Western Orthodox Church did not disappear. The early part of the 20th century was characterized by a series of false starts. In 1911, Arnold Harris Matthew, a former Roman Catholic priest, later consecrated an Old Catholic bishop, entered into union with the Oriental Orthodox Patriarchate of Antioch under Metropolitan Gerasimos Mesar of Beirut, and in 1912 with the Eastern Orthodox Pope Photios of Alexandria. Some speculate Bishop Matthew's 1909 Old Catholic Missal and ritual may have been approved as a Western Rite liturgy by Pope Photios of Alexandria, who wrote, "Both unions were contracted in quick succession, and only lasted for an effective period of a few months." Though the union was protested by the Archbishop of Canterbury to Photios and the Patriarch of Antioch. In 1890, the first Western Rite Orthodox community in North America, an Episcopal parish in Green Bay, Wisconsin, pastored by Fr. Renevelat, was received by Bishop Vladimir Sokolovsky. However, Vilat was soon ordained a bishop in the Jacobite Church, an Oriental Orthodox Church not in communion with the Eastern Orthodox Church. Other small groups using the Western Rite have been received, but usually have either had little impact or have declared their independence soon after their reception. Western Rite parishes were established in Poland in 1926, when a half-dozen congregations were received into Eastern Orthodoxy. However, the movement dwindled during World War II. Orthodox Church of France. In 1936, the ROC received a small group led by a former liberal Catholic bishop, Louis Charles Winnert, 1880–1937, as a legalized Orthodox Occidental Yoa. Winnert was received as an archimandrite, took the religious name Irony, and soon died. Winnert's work was continued with occasional conflict by one of his priests, Eugraph Kowalski, 1905–1970, and Lucian Chambault, the latter of which oversaw a small Orthodox Benedictine community in Paris. After 1946, Kowalski began to recreate a Gallican Rite based on the letters of Germain of Paris, a 6th-century bishop of Paris, numerous early Western missals and sacramentaries, and some Byzantine modifications. His development was the Divine Liturgy of Saint Germanus of Paris. Archimandrite Alexis van der Mensbrugh, a former Roman Catholic monk, who taught at the Western Church's St. Denis Theological Institute but remained in the Eastern Rite, attempted to restore the ancient Roman Rite, replacing medieval accretions with Gallican and Byzantine forms. Eventually, Alexis was consecrated as an ROC bishop in 1960, continuing his Western Rite work under the auspices of the Moscow Patriarchate. In 1953, pressured by the Russian Orthodox Church to adopt the Eastern Rite, the Western Orthodox Church went its own way, changing its name to the Orthodox Church of France. After several years of isolation, the church was recognized as an autonomous church by Metropolitan Anastasia Gribanovsky of Rocker and was in communion with Rocker from 1959 to 1966. Archbishop John Maximovich, Rocker's representative in Western Europe at the time, became the archpastor of the Church of France. At this time, Maximovich had the church change its name to Église Orthodoxe Catholique de Francicoff. Maximovich also consecrated Kowalski in 1964 as a bishop. Kowalski took the religious name Jean Nectaire. Maximovich's death in 1966 was a serious blow to the Western Orthodox Christians in France. While the Russian Orthodox Church's Western Rite mission withered and ended, Akoff thrived. However, after Maximovich died, Kowalski was left without canonical protection until his death in 1970. In 1972, the Church found a new canonical superior in the Romanian Orthodox Church. Gilles Bertrand Hardy was then consecrated as bishop and took the religious name Germain of Saint Denis. In 1993, after long conflict with the Synod of the Romanian Orthodox Church about alleged canonical irregularities within Akoff, the Romanian Orthodox Church withdrew its blessing of Akoff and broke off communion. The Romanian Orthodox Church decided, which is contested by Akoff, to depose Bertrand Hardy from all sacerdotal functions. This decision, which was never accepted by Akoff, is applied by the canonical dioceses of the EOF Assemblée des Évêques Orthodoxes de France. The sanction was confirmed and explained in 2001 by another document, Avis d'expertise canonique, from the Secretary of the Romanian Synod, a document which the Akoff considers to have no value. The Romanian Orthodox Church established a deanery under Bertrand Hardy's brother, Archpriest Gregor Bertrand Hardy, to minister to those parishes which chose to remain in communion with the Romanian Orthodox Church. In 2001, scandalized by the revelation within Ecof of Bertrand Hardy's 1995 marriage and subsequent annulment, 10 parishes separated from Ecof formed the Union des Associations Cultuelles Orthodoxes de Rite Occidental Uicoro and began negotiations in 2004 with the Serbian Orthodox Church to be canonized. The laity and clergy of Uicoro were received individually into the French diocese of the Serbian Orthodox Church in 2006. These parishes are now predominantly Byzantine Rite, with the Gallican liturgy served a few times a year. Of the communities that left Ecof, the only ones which now retain the Western Rite are those that went on to form the Orthodox Church of the Gauls. Although the name of the church legally remains the Orthodox Catholic Church of France, it usually goes by its previous name, the Orthodox Church of France. North America. Saint Tikhon of Moscow's contribution to the Western Rite has been more enduring. While he was bishop of the ROC diocese in America, some Episcopalians were interested in joining Orthodoxy while retaining Anglican liturgical practices. Tikhon sent the 1892 Book of Common Prayer, inquired about the viability of Orthodox parishes composed of former Anglicans using Anglican liturgical practices. In 1904, the Holy Synod concluded that such parishes were possible and provided a list of doctrinal corrections to the Book of Common Prayer's text of the prayers and rites that were necessary to profess in Orthodox worship. The Holy Synod also concluded that detailed changes in the Book of Common Prayer and in Anglican liturgical practices, together with compilations of new prayers and entire rites, can only be carried out on location in America and not from Moscow. While Tikhon did not receive any Episcopalians as none approached him for reception into the ROC, his efforts laid the groundwork for the later reception of Episcopalians into the OV following the 1975 revision of the Book of Common Prayer. The most successful and stable group of Western Rite parishes originated within the Orthodox Church under Bishop Efthymios Ofish in the 1930s as part of the American Orthodox Catholic Church. In 1932, Bishop Efthymios consecrated an episcopal priest, Ignatius Nichols, as auxiliary bishop of Washington and assigned him to the Western Rite parishes. However, due to complaints from Episcopalians that the Episcopal Church was the American Orthodox Church, the American Orthodox Church that Efthymios and Nicholas were a part of became estranged from what would become the Orthodox Church in America OCA. The subsequent marriages of both Efthymios and Nichols violated Orthodox canon law and left the church and its subsidiaries without canonical recognition. In 1932, Nichols founded the Society of Clerks Secular of St. Basil as a devotional society for clergy and laity dedicated to the celebration of the Western Rite. Nichols also consecrated Alexander Turner as a bishop in 1939. Turner pastored a small parish in Mount Vernon until Nichols' death in 1947, when he assumed leadership of the society and concluded that there was no future for the Society of St. Basil outside of canonical orthodoxy. Turner described the situation the society found itself in by saying, "It was, during the tempestuous days following the Bolshevik Revolution, with the collapse of that plan and the submission of the ethnic groups to the churches of their homelands, the society was left in isolation. Through Father Paul Schnerle, he began unofficial dialogue with Metropolitan Antony Bashir. Even before this, Turner had been promoting Western Rite Orthodoxy through his periodical Orthodoxy. In 1961, the society, consisting of 3 parishes, was received into the Syrian Antiochian Archdiocese on the basis of Metropolitan Antony's 1958 edict. Upon reception, Bishop Alexander Turner became a canonical priest of the Antiochian Orthodox Church, guiding the group as vicar general until his death in 1971. Thereafter he was succeeded by Schnerle. However, after Turner's death, the sole surviving Basilian, William Francis Forbes, returned to the American Orthodox Catholic Church and was consecrated a bishop in October 1974. Besides the original communities associated with the society, a number of other parishes have been received into the Western Rite Vicariate of the Antiochian Archdiocese, particularly as elements within the Episcopal Church became dissatisfied with liturgical change and the ordination of women. The first Episcopal parish to be received into the OV was the Episcopal Church of the Incarnation in Detroit, Michigan. Additionally, several Western Rite missions have been founded within the OV, some growing into full parish status. Furthermore, when parishes of the Evangelical Orthodox Church joined the Antiochian Archdiocese in 1987, a few parishes joined as Western Rite congregations. However, many of these former EOC congregations subsequently switched to the Byzantine Rite. Among Old Calendarist groups, the sole jurisdiction utilizing a Western Rite is the autonomous Orthodox Metropolia of North and South America and the British Isles, with approximately 24 parishes. Due to their generally stricter stance, only older rites such as the Sarum are permitted. The Russian and Antiochian jurisdictions in North America operate under a structure known as a vicariate within their respective patriarchates. The Antiochian structure covers Western Rite parishes primarily in the United States, while the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia has established parishes, missions, and monasteries in the United Kingdom, Germany, and Norway. Elsewhere, in 1995, the Church of Antioch also established a British deanery to absorb converts from the Church of England, though none of these congregations is now Western Rite. Western Rite Orthodoxy in Australia and New Zealand emerged mostly from Anglican and continuing Anglican communities. Some communities were received into the rocker by Archbishop Hilarion Capral of the Diocese of Sydney, Australia and New Zealand. Others were received into the Greek Orthodox Church of Antioch by Bishop Gibran Ramlawi and Metropolitan Archbishop Paul Saliba of the Antiochian Orthodox Archdiocese of Australia. Saliba has recently received around 30 Western Rite parishes in the Philippines. Some Western Rite parishes are also a part of the Oriental Orthodox Churches. The Syrian Patriarchate of Antioch consecrated Antonio Francisco Xavier Alvarez as Archbishop of Ceylon, Goa and India in 1889, authorizing a Roman Rite diocese under his supervision. Additionally, in 1891, the Syrians consecrated Vilat as Archbishop for the American Old Catholics. Current status in the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia. On July 10, 2013, the recognition and status of Western Rite parishes within Rocker seemed to significantly change. The Synod of Bishops of Rocker, presided over by its first hierarch, decreed that Rocker would no longer ordain clergy for Western Rite parishes. Bishop Jerome Shaw of Manhattan would be censured for unapproved ecclesial services and forcibly retired without the right to perform ordinations. Some ordinations performed by Shaw would not be recognized, and those candidates would be thoroughly examined before regularization. A commission would examine how to integrate Western Rite clergy and communities into the Russian Orthodox Church. Western Rite clergy and communities need to adopt the order of divine services of the Eastern Orthodox Church, but may preserve certain particularities of the Western Rite. Adherence to the rules and traditions of the Russian Orthodox Church, in particular, is required. The Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia established a working commission to deal with the peculiarities that led to decision of July of 2013. Within the following year, there was established a new leadership structure that eventually led to the establishment of a revitalized Western Rite Vicariate under the omophorion of His Eminence Metropolitan Hilarion. New Western Rite parishes and monasteries continue to be founded by rocker and priests. Deacons and subdeacons within the Western Rite continue to be ordained from 2014 to the present, including in Sweden and the United States. Orthodox Church in America. Mention of the Western Rite was often made in the OCA, the most prominent being a mention during a speech by the primate of the OCA, Metropolitan Jonah Pathwassen, in April 2009. On September 8, 2018, the Orthodox Church of America established a Western Rite mission parish in Alberta, Canada. However, the OCA has not yet officially established an organizational structure for future Western Rite parishes. Independent Western Orthodox churches and monasteries. There are a number of independent Western Orthodox congregations and monasteries. Liturgy. Western Rite parishes do not all utilize the same liturgy, but often use a particular liturgy depending upon their individual affiliations prior to entering Orthodoxy. At present, there are 9 different uses available to Western Rite parishes. The Divine Liturgy of Saint Tikhon. This liturgy is currently used by approximately 2/3 of congregations in the OV. The Rite of St. Tikhon was developed utilizing the 1928 American Book of Common Prayer and the Anglican Missal. The Book of Common Prayer was altered by removing the filioque from the text of the Nicene Creed, adding prayers for the dead. It is utilized primarily by former Anglican and Episcopalian background parishes. The Divine Liturgy of St. Gregory utilized by the remainder of the OV, as well as some communities in Rocker. As of 2016, the Rocker Western Rite communities use a restored Gregorian Mass, which is derived from texts that had been discovered and translated that are pre-Tridentine in origin and have no Byzantine inclusions. The Sarum liturgy, a British use of the Divine Liturgy of St. Gregory, which retained many local Anglo-Saxon, Gallican, and Celtic elements. It is celebrated within Rocker by the St. Bride Hermitage and by the Hermitage of the Holy Cross. The text is based upon a 19th century Pearson English translation of the Sarum Missal, corrected of post-schism insertions. An epiclesis from the Gothic Missal is included. St. Hilarion Press and St. Gregory's Press editions of Sarum services were blessed for canonical use in September 2008 and December 2008, respectively. The English Liturgy, the Russian adaptation of the 1549 English Book of Common Prayer according to the criteria set forth by the Holy Synod of Russia. This liturgy has been augmented with material from the Sarum Missal, Gothic Missal, York Rite, and 1718 Scottish non-juror liturgy. An epiclesis from the Gothic Missal is included. This liturgy is not the same rite as the Liturgy of St. Tikhon, and the two rites differ in many respects. The Liturgy of St. Germanus utilized by the French Orthodox Church, the Orthodox Church of the Gauls, and the Orthodox Church of France, as well as some parishes of Rocker and the Serbian and Romanian Patriarchates. The Liturgy of St. Germanus is a reconstructed version of the Gallican Mass, supplemented with elements from the Byzantine, Celtic, and Mozarabic rites. The Liturgy of St. John the Divine utilized by a monastery of the Moscow Patriarchate, and in publication within Rocker. It is a reconstructed version of the first millennium Celtic rite of the British Isles, from the Stowe Missal and other sources, and intended for modern use. The name is from the origin asserted by the Church in the British Isles before the Great Schism. The Mozarabic Rite, the autonomous Orthodox Metropolia of North and South America and the British Isles, as well as the Holy Synod of Milan, permit use of the Mozarabic Rite and the Sarum use. The Ambrosian Rite. The Ambrosian Rite may be used in Western Rite parishes of Rocker. In 2018, a discovery was made of a very ancient Missal which included a nearly complete Ambrosian Rite liturgy that is in the process of being translated into English. The Glastonbury Rite. The Glastonbury Rite was at one time used in the Celtic Orthodox Church. In France, Bishop Alexis van der Mensbroek of the ROC published a Missal in 1962 which contained his restored Gallican Rite and his restored pre-Celestinian Italic Rite. Neither of Mensbroek's restored rites are used by Orthodox groups. Liturgical development. Most of the present Western Rite liturgies have been developed along the guidelines given to St. Tikhon by the Holy Synod in 1904/7. As noted above, Tikhon's request to the Holy Synod concerned accepting episcopal parishes into the Orthodox Church while permitting them to retain the liturgies of the Book of Common Prayer. While St. Tikhon's request was specifically concerned with Anglicans converting, its recommendations came to be implemented for those parishes who did not have a specifically Anglican background. The two most important required changes included the removal of the filioque from the Nicene Creed and the addition of an epiclesis which specifically invokes the Holy Spirit and a petition for the Spirit to change the bread and wine. When the Antiochian Western Rite edict was issued, it became necessary to determine what additions or corrections to Western liturgies would need to be made to bring those rites into conformity with the 1904 Russian synodal decree as well as the ukase of 1936. To that end, the Antiochian Western Rite Commission was convened in 1958, composed of Fr. Paul Schnerle, Stephen Upson, Alexander Schmemann, and John Meyendorff for the purpose of determining the mode of reception of groups desiring to employ the Western Rite and the character of the rites to be used, as well as the authorization of official liturgical. Schmemann actively followed the liturgical movement in the Roman Catholic and Anglican Church and was an advocate for renewal of the Orthodox liturgy. In January 1962, the official Western Rite Directory was issued, establishing liturgical usages and customs and discipline, drawing on principles of the 1904 Moscow Synodal response to St. Tikhon, the authorization of Western Rite offices by Metropolitan Gerasimos Mesar of Beirut, and the 1932 Russian ukase of Metropolia. Liturgical books. Officially, the OV provides one liturgical book, the Orthodox Missal, which contains both the Liturgy of St. Tikhon and the Liturgy of St. Gregory, with appropriate propers for seasons, feasts, saints, and prayers before and after Mass. The Antiochian Archdiocese publishes the St. Andrew Service Book (SASB), also known as the Western Rite Service Book, which was developed by St. Michael's Church in California under the leadership of the late Father Michael Trigg. The 1996 second and 2005 third editions of the SASB received official sanction from Metropolitan Philip Saliba. In addition to duplicating the contents of the Orthodox Missal, the SASB also includes forms for Matins and Vespers, the benediction of the Blessed Sacrament, and the threefold Amen common to the Byzantine epiclesis, but absent in the Orthodox Missal. The SASB was produced by the Antiochian Archdiocese without the participation of the OV. The Orthodox Missal is an official publication of the OV and is the Vicariate's standard and approved text, with the SASB authorized by the Archdiocese as an approved text. Parishes within the OV are permitted to use either the Liturgy of St. Tikhon or that of St. Gregory. While most parishes use the Tikhonite liturgy, several use the Gregorian liturgy on weekdays or on specific Sundays of the year. Presently, there is no breviary specifically designed for the Orthodox Western Rite, though priests of the OV who celebrate the liturgy of St. Gregory are expected to pray as much of the Breviarium Monasticum as possible in the Anglican breviary. The same hours, in English or Latin, are approved for Christ the Saviour monastery under the rocker. However, priests who celebrate the liturgy of St. Tikhon pray a form of morning prayer, and even so approved by the OV. Also in common use within the OV, though not officially approved, are St. Dunstan's Plainsong Psalter, the English Office Noted, and the St. Ambrose Hymnal. The St. Dunstan's Plainsong Psalter sets the Psalter and selected canticles to Gregorian and British chant and includes orders for morning prayer, evensong, and compline. The English Office Noted includes morning, noonday, and evening prayers, compline, and the Psalter set in modern notation. The St. Ambrose Hymnal provides musical settings of classic Western hymns, as well as post-schism and modern hymns which are judged not to contradict the Orthodox faith. In 2017, it was decided that the restored Gregorian liturgy and the English liturgy were to be the main liturgies celebrated by rocker Western Rite parishes going forward. Parishes that were using the Ambrosian or other forms were approved on a case-by-case basis. Within rocker, on a limited basis, the St. Colman Prayer Book has been authorized by Metropolitan Hilarion Capral for use within the Diocese of Sydney, Australia, and New Zealand. It has since received permission for limited use within other dioceses. The book includes the Sarum Rite, English Rite, and Gregorian Rite liturgies, together with a simplified version of the monastic hours. Most of the occasional services required by a parish priest through the course of the year are there, as well as the rites of Holy Week and a lectionary. In September 2008, Capral blessed the Sarum Rite series published by St. Hilarion Press, originally under the auspices of the Holy Synod of Milan. The Holy Synod of Milan also published approximately 30 volumes of texts of pre-schism services. They contain complete forms for celebration of the liturgy or Mass, the divine office, the mysteries or sacraments, and many other services, with full chant notation. In December 2008, the St. Gregory's Press edition was also blessed for actual usage. These contains full forms, with complete chant notation, for the celebration of the liturgy or Mass and of the divine office, i.e. the canonical hours. Church calendar. Among those Western Rite parishes that are within the Eastern Orthodox Church, some use the Eastern Orthodox liturgical calendar with the Byzantine paschal cycle, while others use other calendars. The communion of the Western Orthodox Churches uses the Gregorian calendar to determine the dates of the holy days and Pascha, while each member church has its own liturgical calendar. The Luxual Lectionary, Missale Gothicum, Missale Gallicum, and the Gallican adaptations of the Martyrologium Hieronymianum are the chief authorities for the liturgical year of the Gallican Rite. The Western Rite parishes of the autonomous Orthodox Metropolia of North and South America and the British Isles follow the Julian calendar. Vestments. Priests of the Western Rite utilize standard Western vestments as a part of their liturgy, whether celebrating one of the Western liturgies or, as far as Antiochians are concerned, when concelebrating a Byzantine liturgy, with some exceptions. See criticisms below. Antiochian Byzantine Rite Orthodox priests who can celebrate Antiochian Western Rite liturgies wear Byzantine-style vestments, and hierarchs wear Byzantine vestments when participating in Western liturgies. Clergy using the Sarum or English liturgies use the vestments commonly known as Sarum, but which were actually used throughout northwestern Europe and the British Isles. These are typified by apparels of the seasonal color added to the alb and amice for priest, deacon, subdeacon, clerk, and servers in certain groups, although there is no evidence this was done before the 13th century. Organizations. Publishing houses. The official publishing arm of the OV is St. Luke's Priory Press in Stanton, New Jersey. Among their publications are the Orthodox Missal, the official service book of the OV, the Orthodox Ritual, the official source for the administration of all the sacraments in the Vicariate, and the annual Ordo Calendar. They also publish several apologetic works concerning the Western Rite. Lancelot Andrewes Press is the publishing arm of the Fellowship of St. Dunstan and publishes material which is utilized by congregations and individuals in Western rites. The primary mission of Lancelot Andrewes Press is to publish material for the advancement of historic Christian orthodoxy as expressed by the liturgical and devotional usages of traditional English Christianity. Among their publications are the monastic Diurnal and St. Dunstan's Plainsong Psalter. While not official publishing houses, St. Petroc Monastery, Christminster, and St. John Cassion Press have published copies of liturgies for use by Rocker Western Rite congregations. St. John Cassion Press distributes former St. Hilarion Press publications. See organizations above blessed for Rocker use, including Orthodox Prayers of Old England Omnibus Service Book, the Holy Psalter Corps of the Divine Office, Old Sarum Rite Missal, the Companion Epistle, and Gospel Book, Chant Ordinarium, a Kyrielle, and West. This body of work includes several apologetic works concerning Western rites and orthodoxy in general. The most voluminous texts of the Western Rite in English, however, have been produced by Old Calendarists. Recently, 10,000 pages of text of the Western monastic Psalter in traditional English were placed online for free download and use. Devotional societies. There are also devotional societies within the Orthodox Christian Society of Our Lady of Walsingham, dedicated to encouragement of devotion to the Theotokos, particularly under the title of Our Lady of Walsingham and the preservation of the replica of the Shrine of Walsingham. The Fellowship of St. Dunstan, dedicated to historic Christian orthodoxy, particularly traditional English Christianity. Parishes and missions. Parishes and missions belonging to the Western Rite can be found in a number of Orthodox jurisdictions. The single largest group of such communities is to be found within the Orthodox Church of France, followed by jurisdictions of the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Communion of Western Orthodox Churches. There are also parishes and missions belonging to the Old Calendarist tradition. Canonical missionary societies. These groups are canonical missionary societies with a core of canonical Orthodox laity served by canonical Orthodox clergy within the Orthodox Church, with the goal of future reception of converts into the Western Rite. The societies themselves were formed inside the Orthodox Church for reception of converts and not for the reception of the societies themselves. The Orthodox Church, they are currently under the guidance of, is also listed. St. Brendan Oasis, Panama City, Florida. Rocker. Criticisms. Metropolitan Callistos where says that the Western Rite is inherently divisive, following different liturgical traditions and their neighboring Byzantine Rite Orthodox Christians. Those using the Western Rite do not share liturgical unity with them and present an unfamiliar face to the majority of Orthodox Christians. Where is particularly concerned about the further fragmentation of orthodoxy in non-Orthodox countries, in this case in Britain.